After 26 years, you'd be forgiven for not expecting much out of a new Streets of Rage game, especially since the heyday of the beat-em-up genre has long since passed. However, Streets of Rage 4 has been an awesome surprise, delivering a classic experience with a couple of modern twists and an undeniably cool style. From the moment you boot the game up, Streets of Rage 4 stands out with its bold, hand-drawn art style, buttery smooth animation, and killer soundtrack. The character designs in particular are a fantastic evolution of the series' old 8-bit sprites, and they are bursting with personality, while the animation has this very fluid quality to it that leaves the core gameplay feeling super satisfying. I do find myself wishing that the game used more traditionally animated sequences, as seen in the game's opening, instead of animatic cutscenes, though these get the job done well enough, and there are a handful of traditionally animated flourishes throughout the game that really leave an impression. Alongside the game's strong visual style is one of the most infectious soundtracks I've heard in a while. From remixes of familiar Streets of Rage tracks to brand new compositions, Streets of Rage 4 is packed with groovy tunes to kick butt to, and while it's hard to pick a favorite among them, the decision to have guest composers creating the game's boss tracks really does help them stand apart from the usual level tracks. On top of all that, the game has these really punchy sound effects that make the beat-em-up action feel that much more impressive, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't love the little pickup sound as well. Streets of Rage 4 feels like the best case scenario of reviving an old property with modern flair, and it also utilizes plenty of nostalgic art and sound effects for longtime fans, though you will have to put in some work to experience the bulk of it. But if it's nostalgia you're after, then you're likely to find it in the story and gameplay of Streets of Rage 4. The game picks up 10 years after the events of Streets of Rage 3, after Wood Oak City falls under the control of a crime syndicate led by the Y Twins, the children of former series villain Mr. X. Players take control of returning heroes Blaze and Axel, as well as newcomers Cherry Hunter and Floyd Araya, in an effort to take down the Y Twins and return peace to the city. The majority of this story is told over the course of a text crawl and serves its purpose as a reason to get the Streets of Rage heroes back out on the streets well enough. I'll admit that I always like when a world story actually progresses, and Streets of Rage 4 does that with its new playable characters and visibly older returning characters, but if you're looking for in-depth lore and world building, you won't find anything more than a short bio in the extras menu, which is about as much as I expected, so whatever. This is an old school game with the paper-thin narrative to match. While I was expecting the game to have a superficial narrative, I was also expecting Streets of Rage 4 to carry on the style of the franchise's earlier games, and although it does do that, it also manages to throw some new and interesting ideas into the mix. On top of the standard strikes and grapples, which you can now chain together with wall bounces and juggles, Streets of Rage 4 also introduces special attacks. These moves can be performed at the cost of health, which can in turn be recovered by inflicting damage on enemies without being hit. It adds an interesting risk-reward element to what would otherwise be a pretty familiar old-school beat-em-up, and the special moves themselves are powerful and fun to incorporate into your standard combos. Familiar though they may be, the game's core mechanics are still really engaging and offer a surprising amount of variety, as each character has their own distinct movesets and attributes. Blaze offers speedy combos and attacks that can hit grounded enemies, while Axel possesses a good balance between power and speed. The newcomers to the franchise are where things get really wild though. Cherry is super mobile, and though her attacks don't do a massive amount of damage, she's able to initiate grabs by simply jumping onto enemies. Meanwhile, Floyd, my personal favorite, is slow as hell and hits like a truck, but the real appeal of using him is his ability to grab enemies, move with them, and then initiate a double grab to take down multiple enemies at once. There's even a decent amount of unlockable characters, and these all have distinct strengths and weaknesses as well, such as the invaluable ability to dash. The game's variety of playable characters really shines throughout the 12-level story mode as well, thanks to a good mix of distinct enemy types and stage gimmicks that keep any one playstyle from feeling superior. For example, more mobile characters are going to feel great to use against enemies with AoE attacks, or in stages where environmental hazards activate with little warning, but the slower-moving, grapple-focused Floyd is king when it comes to stages dotted with pitfalls, since you can easily turn them to your advantage with the greater control that his grab affords. However, no matter which character you gravitate towards, Streets of Rage 4 offers a solid challenge that steadily increases as you progress, as the game introduces new enemy types that often require a fresh approach, and boss fights that really push your skills to the limit. The bosses themselves are some of my favorite designs in the game, and though they usually shrug off your attacks, learning their patterns and identifying when you should switch between evasion and offense feels really rewarding. With that said though, losing all your lives in a boss fight after slogging your way through a tough level can be pretty disheartening, and while you can gain extra lives by accumulating points, Streets of Rage 4's most old school aspect is its harsh game overs. If you're out of lives, you're going back to the start of the level. The game does offer a helping hand however. Players who are finding the game too tough can choose to enable assists upon respawning, allowing them to customize the number of extra lives and special moves they have access to. The only cost here is that your points at the end of the level will be divided by a corresponding amount to the level of assist that you choose to use, which isn't a huge deal unless you're planning on unlocking everything that Streets of Rage 4 has to offer. I think it's a reasonable way of boosting the game's accessibility for those who want to just experience it through to the credits, while still rewarding die-hard fans for playing the game as intended. For those die-hard fans, your level scores are going to matter a little bit more. As you beat the game's 12 story stages, you gain points which are added to your lifetime score total. These points are earned by beating the levels with each character, with each finishing grade, and on each difficulty. In turn, when this total reaches certain levels, you gain access to new characters, which are mostly retro 8-bit renditions of other characters, but they look, play, and sound distinct from the rest of the roster, so they're worth trying to unlock. On top of more playable characters, you can also unlock separate modes, like the 1-credit arcade mode or the boss rush mode. Finally, Streets of Rage 4 also offers multiplayer options for co-op butt-kicking. For some reason, it only offers 2-player online co-op at launch alongside its 4-player couch co-op, which seems a bit backwards in my mind, but at least it does offer some online modes, so you're free to smack goons around alongside a buddy or go head-to-head with them in battle mode. And with that, Streets of Rage 4 is excellent. If Streets of Rage 4 had simply featured the classic gameplay formula that the series is known for, longtime fans probably would have been satisfied, but the addition of a risk-reward element with the game's special attacks, as well as the evolution of its combo system to include juggling and wall bouncing, are greatly appreciated, as are the super stylish visuals and sound design. The game's bold, hand-drawn characters are so memorable and the soundtrack is so infectious that I'm totally fine recommending this game to everyone on their quality alone, even if you're not typically into beat-em-ups. Streets of Rage 4 is out now for Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One and PC, and is currently available on Game Pass.